Then we move on to the Intruder. The Intruder is a really cool part about Burp Suite. Say for example that we're testing a request, and we can do this from the HTTP history, we can do this from the target sitemap, it doesn't really matter, but we can right click that and then send that request to our Intruder. Now what that's going to do is it's going to fill in the host and the port for us, and it's also going to add in these positions. By default, it's always going to mark every single parameter, including the cookies. So to avoid that, what I just do is I clear all of them and say that I've clicked this button by mistake. Oh crap, I am a hacker, but I clicked this button by mistake. What do I do now? I don't want to select all of them. You can just click auto again and it's going to automatically assign those, but you have to select your whole text. Now what you can also do is clear. Say for example you want to automatically select these parameters only, then you can select this whole header part here. There we go. You can automatically assign them again, and it's going to look for parameters in your selected text, and it's automatically going to mark that parameter. Now we need to mark parameters because what we really want to do is we want to of course test several parameters. We want to replace their values automatically, and we want to do that rapidly. So to do that, we need to select a parameter like this one, for example, add it to our parameter list, and then we have several options for our attack types. And this is where things get really interesting, because we have this sniper attack type, battering ram, pitchfork, and a cluster bomb. All of those have different properties to them. We're going to go over all of them real quick, but I'm searching for them. There we go. So this sniper thing, what it's going to do is it's going to replace a single value into every single parameter, which means that if I have one single value selected like this, it's going to replace my list that I select under the payloads, which I'll select later on, but it's going to add this specific parameter. Now if I have two parameters, it's going to try that value for all of those parameters, so that's going to add up pretty quickly. As you guys can see, if I have about 10 parameters, it's going to try every single value into every single parameter. That's going to be a lot of combinations that it has to go through, and it grows exponentially. We don't always want that. That's why we also have some other options like the battering ram. And what this is going to do is it's going to use one list, but will insert that payload into every single position. So if it's going to have A, B, C, and D on its list, it's going to insert A in here and also in here, and then send that request off, and then B in here and in here, send that request off. It's going to insert C in here and send that request off, and so on. So that's what the battering ram is for. It can be useful to reduce your combinations, but sometimes we want to control those combinations ourselves. That's why we have the pitchforks in here. That's also a possibility, and as you can see, we have payload sets in here as well. We have 1 and 2 now, which is because we selected the pitchfork, and this is going to allow us to select a separate list for every single parameter on its own. And then we have the cluster bomb that also uses as much lists as there are parameters, but that method will test every combination of all of the list items possible. So again, that attack is going to take a lot longer. We're talking about our cluster bomb here, whereas our pitchfork, as we call it, is just if we have two lists, like we have list 1 and 2, it's going to take one value from every list and it's going to insert it in here, and then it's going to move on to the next value on the lists. That's the difference. So it might seem a little bit abstract. I encourage you guys to play with it a little bit, because there are some cool things you can do in here. Now next up is the payload section. I also wanted to show you guys, you can search, by the way. This is really cool because you might have some pages which are really long, and you might be looking for that one parameter. Well, this is going to help you in here. You can search through it, and you can also just refresh this. That's about it. Now on to the payloads page. In here we can set our payloads. Of course, that sounds very logical. In here it really depends on what type of attack we set. In this case we're going to have two payloads because it's a pitchfork attack. I'm going to keep it a little bit simpler, going to go to the sniper, and we only have one list, as you can see right now. And then we can choose what type of list we want. This is really cool because there's some cool stuff in here. If you want, go look at this, because I'm not going to go through all of them, but you have brute forcers, you have null payloads, there's bit flippers in here, there's some really cool stuff. Usually you're just going to use simple lists and you're going to define them yourselves. The Burp Suite Pro version has built-in lists. As you can see here, there's the fuzzing list quick, fuzzing list full, really good lists in here, usernames, passwords as well. These are really useful, but as you can see, it's quite a lot of them, and if you have multiple parameters, you can see that the request count goes up pretty quickly. We can clear that list again. We can then paste our own list from the clipboard also. If you have a list in your clipboard, you can just paste it in here. You can load your list, that's also possible. Then you can remove one item from the list. If we have this list, for example, and I don't want to test for this value, I can remove it. And I can clear my whole list as well. I can add items manually also. I can just do this one by one, but that's going to be quite bothersome, of course. The payload processing rules are really, really cool. What this is basically going to allow you to do is going to allow you to process your payloads before they are being sent to the server. Things like URL encoding, for example, adding prefixes, suffixes. If you want to base 64 encode it, that's all possible, as you can see. So what's going to happen now is, before my payload gets sent to the server, it's first going to get base 64 encoded. As for the URL encoding, you can see that that's already a separate option. So it's going to automatically URL encode all of these options. But you can do so much with this, and there's also the option to invoke a burp extension, which is going to be a separate course to writing your own burp extensions that you can invoke with this stuff. Really, really cool. For example, you might have custom JWT tokens and then you have a payload list. But you don't want to encode that payload list, and you can create a custom extension to encode your JWT token and then send it off to the server. So there are many different things that you can do in here. That's about it for the intruder. There are some options in here as well, but these are very much self-explanatory in my opinion. The request engine is the most important one. If you want to slow down your attacks, you have to set down the number of threads to a lower number. You can also throttle them a little bit by setting a fixed or a variable delay between requests. And you can say when it's supposed to start. For example, if you want to do it delayed, if you want to do it paused, that's also possible. If you want to start your attack, but you want to just have it set up so somebody else can unpause it or something, that's all possible. You have your attack results in here. There are some cool options, some grab matches. This is how it determines some specific things, like it will mark these things if it finds them. If you enable that option, by the way, you have to enable that. And then if it finds one of these values in the response, it's going to flag that response for you. A lot of people don't know that you can do that, but Intruder can automatically flag responses for you. You just have to add it. Then you also have an extraction that's possible. You can extract items specifically from responses. I haven't found a use for this yet, but I can see how it can be useful in certain scenarios, especially for pen testers. And you might need these values in other requests. Then we can grab specific payloads and we can do some redirections as well. So for example, if you have a site that's always giving you a 302, but then might redirect you to a correct site after you log in with correct credentials, and might redirect you to log in if you don't, then you might want to follow that redirection, and that's also possible. You can say always follow redirection or only follow to on-site or in-scope items. You can also cross these cookies and those redirections. That's it for Intruder. Quite a lot of things. One more little small useful thing. You might have 50 Intruder tabs open and you don't know what they're doing anymore. If you double click on a tab in here, you can rename that tab. And then we can see easily what they are doing. So really useful. You can also right click to close all the other tabs. Or you can close a tab and right click it to reopen that tab. That's something not a lot of people know, but this is a very useful trick.